Have you ever been somewhere and got the chills? Felt like someone was watching you? Well, so did the people who entered these hallowed places. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 haunted hospitals. Connecticut Valley Hospital. Not all places that are abandoned are haunted, but more concerning, not all haunted places are completely abandoned. The Connecticut State Hospital in Middletown is also known as the Connecticut Asylum for the Insane. Connecticut has a littered past of state-run hospitals with twisted and complex histories, but this one in particular has the most spine-chilling occurrences. If you head down Route 9 through Middletown, you might notice a collection of buildings off to the southeast, on a hilltop overlooking the city, red brick buildings looming over the whole town. These decaying structures are remnants of the past that have lingered well into the future. The hospital once held as many as 3,200 patients and was a fully functioning institution. They had a series of neglect issues within the walls of the hospital, everything from a patient ingesting batteries, a steel nail, a razor, a top of a beer can, paper clips, and even inserted pens. 10 employees were actually charged in the case, and more than 30 were put on administrative leave. The abuse was systemic, and it was terrible. The hospital was not always this way. It used to be a manicured and pleasant place for the people who stayed there. It was not until the state forced more people into it, institutionalizing not only the chronically ill but the criminally insane, which left the hospital unable to handle the new conditions. The buildings, still in operation, stand as a cold reminder of the things that occurred within them. The ghostly environment is said to be bone-chilling and eerie. No one is allowed in or out, and what happens on the hill remains a mystery. The Eloise Complex. Have you ever heard of a place so haunted that it sold for only $1? The Eloise Complex in Michigan did exactly that. This place is listed as one of the top 10 most haunted places in Michigan, and for good reason. It's the site of the horrors of human testing, gross neglect, and even attacks leading to loss of lives. It is said that the excavators found jars of human parts. The Guardian says that in its prime, 12,000 people cohabitated. The complex had its own police and fire department, a post office, cattle herds, a greenhouse, a cannery, and a tobacco field. It was such a substantial plot of land that at one point maintained its own zip code. As time went on, unused buildings at the site were shut and subsequently destroyed. Eventually, large parcels of the site were sold to the Ford Motor Company, while others were developed into an 18-hole golf course. What previously existed as space for the farmland has since been replaced by a strip of mall and condominiums. Since that time, though, the hospital has devolved into a worse version of itself and is the subject of many questions ever since its horrific reports. A team of ghost hunters investigated the mansion in 2019 and reported that they began to lose their grip on reality, hearing unexplained screams, slamming doors, and rampant poltergeist activity. They had investigated the basement that had been previously unseen due to flooding. There is much conversation in the town as to whether or not ghosts do, in fact, exist, and one of the investigators says he has no doubt. The video, which was posted to social media, viewers began to point out at an hour and 2 minutes in there could potentially be something paranormal, a light anomaly. The ghost hunters then stated, "We're looking back at the raw footage now to see if we can explain it, and it seems to me that there is something out there." The ghost hunters expressed the likelihood that the Eloise Complex is haunted, going on to state, "The scientific world has not completely developed an understanding of what this is yet, but it does not mean we won't in the future." The asylum now is zoned for commercial use, the $1 amount being sold to a developer who has promised to make the hospital grounds into some kind of commercial development to make the whole thing into something the town can actually use. Hopefully, this turnover creates a new purpose and new life for the eerie acreage. Danvers State Hospital. Danvers State Hospital is among the list of most haunted places in America, and for good reason. It was built in 1874 and opened in 1878 under the supervision of architect Nathaniel Jeremiah Bradley in rural Massachusetts. It was built according to a system called the Kirkbride Plan. This structure of building was specifically organized in a way that provided the patients with natural light and air circulation. Thomas Kirkbride thought that these aspects would help with the healing and mental health of the patients. These buildings were all also connected by tunnels. The original plan for the hospital was to house only 500 patients, with potentially room for up to 1,000 more in the attic. However, by the late 1930s, over 2,000 patients were being housed and the overcrowding was severe. There were even people in the basement of the hospital by the 40s. The hospital was established to provide residential treatments for the mentally ill, but its functions expanded to include training programs for nurses in 1889 and also a research laboratory in 1895. Mechanical restraint was deemed unnecessary in the cases of the mentally ill. Reports were made that various shock treatments, lobotomies, medication, and straitjackets were being used to keep the crowded and boisterous hospital under control. The population of the hospital swelled to 2,360, and a total of 278 people passed away that same year. Experts often called Danvers Hospital the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. Even worse, the hospital cemetery held over 770 bodies and headstones, which only had numbers, not names. The entire campus was officially closed in 1992, and all patients were promptly transferred to other facilities. In 2005, the property was sold to a residential apartment developer. Demolition of most of the buildings was started. Even though the building was listed under historical sites, this did not slow down the plans. The Historical Society was immensely disappointed that the building was demolished. The Danvers State Hospital is said to have been the inspiration for H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham Sanitarium. Its gothic style and creepy nature, it is the inspiration for many horror fans and filmmakers. Visitors of the hospital reported patients aimlessly walking the halls or staring into walls. People who have gone into the hospital when it was freshly abandoned say that they have heard ghostly voices and cries of patients asking for help and attention. The torture and abuse from the hospital's operations stayed within the walls of the place until its demolition, and even after, the grounds hold a creepy feeling. We have seen that the walls of psych hospitals can be riddled by their history, and clearly, these 3 locations are an example of that. There is always more to the story behind those tall gates.